Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm here today with Dr. Jemma King. Jemma, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me.
This is going to be an exciting one. So I saw Jemma on stage at South by Southwest back end of last year in a panel discussion with one of your clients, double Olympic gold medalist Shana Jack, as well as the founder of Sleep Aid. And the panel itself was very much around sleep, but it started to branch out into other areas relating to workplace stress and business decision-making and performing under pressure. And I think so many of the points on that panel kind of got me thinking. So I thought I'll try to get Jemma on the pod, and you said, yes, I'll do it. We've managed to kind of coordinate schedule. So by way of introduction, through her firm, BioPsychAnalytics, Jemma works with high-performing companies, teams, and individuals in ways to reduce stress and burnout, decision-making under pressure, as well as getting the most out of teams. You've worked with a very broad range of kind of individuals and organizations, but including the Australian Olympic Swim Team, the Australian Defence Force, McKinsey, Atlassian, and many more. And I thought it'd be awesome to get you onto the pod because I think so many marketers are dealing with pressure, change, burnout. It's been a challenging couple of years in the industry, and I think all the change will continue to make it more so. So it'd be awesome to get you on the pod. And I think we're chatting off air just around kind of, I guess, your perspective or how you got into the space and probably coming at it from a slightly different viewpoint than many. So I thought, like, can we just talk a bit about your journey and starting BioPsychAnalytics and how we kind of came to be in this space?
Well, it was purely accidental. And I think, like a lot of people, like the journey was squiggly. There wasn't just this trajectory where I was set out to be doing this job. And so I, did the right degree and then, I had a plan. It was, I was stressed. And so I was at uni and I went to do honours and do a PhD, and I was like, what should I study? And what most academics do study what they're not very good at, managing stress. And so I was just really lucky to work with these populations like the Australian Special Forces, and then I got asked to work with the Olympic Swim Team and the Australian Institute of Sport, and then McKinsey was like, come and work for me. And I was, it was just serendipity that everybody was stressed at that moment. It became super interested in that topic. Yeah. And so I was kind of dragged into it. I thought, well, I better get a business. And, funnily enough, I have a business degree, but when it came to things like ABN and, all of that practical, how to run a business, do your tax, BAS statements, I had no idea. I could tell you all the complex theoretical frameworks around leadership, management and business, but like totally useless when it came to the practical stuff. So my business partner was very good at that and sort of does the back end, and I do the front end, sort of creative, looking at the research. I do lots of research. So my business is really about bringing and educating people with practical, implementable, science-backed strategies on how to manage stress and operate better in their environments. And I actually do a lot of my own research. So I love, I'm super inquisitive and I'm always wanting to find out more, but, research doesn't really pay the bills. And so that's my love. And then I will then translate what I find into organizations, and that's, consulting. So I'm a sort of a hybrid researcher / consultant.
It's kind of awesome though, isn't it? To be able to kind of have a foot in each camp, still have a foot in the kind of academia and research and probably the stuff that probably in your DNA to some extent, and also have that practical real world, both from a, I guess, financial viewpoint, but also in terms of implementation and kind of being out there in the field, which is kind of cool.
I mean, it's super rewarding. I get people come back after, I might have taught them years ago, and they're like, that thing you told me was just instrumental in me being able to get a promotion or manage my family life as well as, a really stressful job. And just seeing sort of like this, people have epiphanies and have this realization that this is in their hands. And if you just have to understand the mechanisms underneath which, your physiology and your psychology run on, you can actually do amazing things. And I think that's, super rewarding. So I really can't ask for more. just really, super happy and excited to get up every day.
From what I see, it's kind of harder and harder at the moment. I think like there's kind of macroeconomic challenges that have kind of been there for a few years. Marketers are generally dealing with lots of change, and we've kind of in the last year or so, this in this kind of wave of technological change and generative AI and ChatGPT and
There's no playbook, like nobody, like all those theories that you learned maybe at uni in marketing or, your mentors told you, like chuck all that stuff out. It's a new world order and nobody knows. Nobody has the answer. And it's shifting so frenetically and in different directions. So I think everybody's just out there. No one has the key.
Yeah, and change is hard, right? And it's scary. And I think marketers are under so much pressure. In-house marketers are kind of dealing with external stakeholders, pressure from above, trying to keep their team going and trying to keep on top of the change. Like, is that something that you're...
I said, stress is kryptonite to creativity, and marketers have got to be creative. Like that's one of their, critical skill sets. And when you're under pressure, you don't have a formula. You have made several mistakes in the last, campaigns or whatever. It is terrifying. And I know that uncertainty is actually more painful and stressful than known negatives. So you're better off knowing that's bad than having uncertainty in life. Certainty causes enormous amounts of stress. So yeah, I really do feel really sorry for people who are trying to lead or trying to, make their way in the world in this crazy world at the moment.
What kind of what practical strategies you're working with team? I think the themes I kind of went through there are probably not distinct to marketing, right? They're probably more applicable to all kinds of teams and businesses. Like, what are the kind of practical strategies that you kind of work with teams to try to implement in terms of managing stress, managing burnout?
Yeah, I think that what I always teach is my foundational, educational element is you cannot expect to lead others or organization or campaign or anything unless you first manage yourself. So if you haven't got your, as you can say, proverbial shit together, there is no way that anyone's going to be convinced by you, trust you, want to be led by you, or pay you big money if they can see that you aren't even coping in, just the basics of your life. And what does that mean? Like, are you turning out a bit disheveled and tired because you haven't got your sleep sorted? Are you, out of shape, overweight, underweight? Are you engaging in dopamine enhancing behaviors that are probably not advantageous, like drinking, taking drugs, whatever it is, vaping, whatever? Do you have fractious relationships? Are you not coping with your primary, significant other? Do your kids still talk to you? Do you have a formula? Have you got exercise, sleep, diet, time off sorted out? Do you know what you need to be a high functioning individual? And if you said no to any of those questions, that would be my first place to start with yourself. Start with your physiology, your psychology, your primary relationships, and then you can have effect. Then you can be creative. Then you can be the type of person that people want to listen to, pay money, lead, be led by. And I think people get that wrong. They think that there's something external out there that I need to get, give, do. And once I've got that, then I will work on myself. But people kind of get a vibe off you. People, when you walk into a room, they may not know exactly what it is, but people have this subconscious feeling around you, like, I don't know, there's something off about that person. I don't know what it is. But when I'm risking, a big campaign, a big, contract, or, a big budget, they just go, I don't know, maybe I'll give it to that other person. They may not look as like exciting or creative, but they look a lot more stable to me. And I think because everything out there is so unstable and so chaotic, people want stability. And you have to embody that sense of trustworthiness and stability. Yeah, so I think that, if you first thing is sleep. Like I said at South by Southwest, everything stems from there. And I was, went fighting and kicking into this realization. But as a stress researcher, I'm like, man, this is it. You start there, and because if you're tired, you cannot do anything else very good.
It does feel that kind of looking after yourself first. It is kind of the oxygen on the airplane, right? It
sounds boring and everything, but like, oh my God, it's so true. You have to look after yourself.
I think of that as a parent. I think it's always, you always have to put your kids first, and I think it's probably took a while to flip that. And I think you actually can't do that unless you are looking after yourself first in terms of a lot of those things that you mentioned. And it actually then puts you in a better position to be, better with kids and better with your friends and better with key relationships. Can we talk about sleep? Because I think it's, I think I attended that session because that actually is something that I probably for the first, given my age away here, but probably first, 35 years of my life, I proudly was a, 4 or 5 hours sleep per night, and kind of, we'll sleep when we're dead, and it's a waste of time, and all those.
It was like a badge of honor, wasn't it? It was like, I've only had 3 hours sleep. Now.
Maybe I had the sleep gene. That was always my perspective on it, and probably the last 5-6 years I put a lot of effort into it, and it's but yeah, can we talk about it? Because I think the science that you went through at South by Southwest, and also practical advice and tips, and how it does set you up for the next day, right?
Actually, after South by Southwest, I had someone come up to me and say, "Can you please write a book?" So I've got a book deal on sleep. So I'm sort of in the midst of writing that now. And my God, like, people are just having, like I did, having this absolute epiphany that, wow, all I need to do is that, and my whole perspective on life changes. I mean, so there isn't a system in your body that isn't affected by sleep deprivation. And you can tell someone's biological age by how much they sleep. All of us, whether we like it or not, if you live in the hill tribes of Papua New Guinea, or if you are from Sweden, or if you're from, Midwest or Melbourne or wherever, humans need, on average, 7.5 hours of sleep. There are outliers. So there are people who are very, very lucky people who have a gene called the DEC2 gene. I think it's about 4 in 100,000 people have this gene, and they only need 4 hours sleep. There's no physiological decrements at all from them having that much sleep. And interestingly enough, there's a overrepresentation of these people who are in politics, who are in startups, entrepreneurs, CEOs, generals, because while all of us are slumbering, they are up reading and getting ahead of the curve, and just getting,
Wasn't Winston Churchill one, I think?
Yeah, he's definitely was one of those lucky people. And you may find there's other people in your family that didn't need much sleep. I'm sort of about a 6-hour person. I don't really need 7.5. I can function pretty well on no sleep. But if you're starting to get up to 9 hours, 10 hours, that there could be something wrong as well. There's a strong correlation between a lot of like mental health disruption, dementia, other metabolic disorders, if you're sleeping, a lot of hours. The exception is elite athletes. So there's a correlation between sleep and success. And I always ask, do you know what the greatest number one predictor of athletic success or team athletic success is? Do you know what that is? The greatest predictor?
Well,
it's injury prevention.
Yeah. What is it? It's availability is the best ability.
Yeah. So if you're more available and you're not injured, you've got a greater propensity to win. And the greatest predictor of injury prevention is sleep. Actually, deep, slow wave sleep. So yeah, if you want to perform at a high level, particularly athletically, or any type of sport, you have to get sleep, because there are certain really important parts of your sleep architecture that are coded for cellular, muscular, bone regeneration, repair. And if you don't get that, which is the deep slow wave sleep, and most of your deep slow wave sleep is in the 2 hours before midnight. So if you're not getting that big chunk of replenishing sleep, it's very hard for you to replenish, repair, and therefore be available. So, yeah, there's that old wives' tale: every hour before midnight's worth two after. So
I've never heard that. Every hour before. Yeah, interesting. And but then it probably would be supported a little bit by science. Is that right, with the slow wave?
absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. So that's why shift work is so dangerous, is because if you're not getting that, that replenishing sleep before midnight, it's very, very hard to get it back. You have to train very hard. You have to have your house set up. You have to have your life set up. And that's why they're looking at making shift work a class 2 carcinogen, because the correlation with sleep disruption through shift work and cancer, metabolic disorder, even divorce, miscarriage, a whole lot of things is really strong. People who engage in shift work live on average 15 years less than non-shift workers. And so here's a question for your listeners. If you, in the last, so if there's 25 days in a year where you sleep, if you're awake between the hours of 10 and 4 a.m. for at least 2 hours, you are considered a shift worker. So that's a lot of people.
So 25 days a year between 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. that you're awake for 2 hours of that time.
Yep. 4 times a week.
4 times a week. Yeah, okay.
So that's probably like
a lot of people.
Yeah, it's like, and then what? They're not shift working. They're on Netflix. They're on their phones at night. They're so many kids are up to 1 a.m. on a regular basis, 2 a.m.
It's terrifying. And what about that connection with undersleeping and then your ability to turn up the next day in the office and make good decisions and work with your team? And because the kind of the conversation at South by Southwest kind of steered in, like, obviously you had Shannon Jack there as an Olympian, and it's kind of a different purpose, right, to being a white collar worker going into the office. But I think there's so many of those benefits or drawbacks, right, depending on whether you're getting that amount of sleep or not. If we could maybe talk a little bit about that. Yeah,
it is like so most people who I see who have mental health disruption also have a sleep disorder. So the direction of causality is really hard to untease. Are they mentally disrupted because they're not sleeping, or are they not sleeping because they're mentally disrupted? And I actually believe a lot of it is that if you're not sleeping properly, you do have mental health disruption. And there's a mechanism is that throughout the day, when you use your brain uses energy, and it's through this mechanism where adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, makes a little explosion in your head, and the bond goes off, and that breaking of the bond is what gives your brain the energy that it needs to think, look, speak, reminisce, remember. And so as you build up the energy usage throughout the day, the byproduct of that explosion is a thing called adenosine. So this is a product molecule that builds up in your brain throughout the day. And it's kind of like Mother Nature's dimmer switch. So when you get this build up, it's like, okay, you've been thinking, you've been using your brain too long, it's time to slow down. And we know that product, that adenosine, actually gives you this impending sense of doom. We know this because adenosine is also used as heart medication for tachycardia. And so when the doctor has to administer adenosine, they'll often take the patient's hand and say, don't worry, you are not going to die. It's just this medication. So people think that it's like overwhelming, like the world is about to end. And there's only one way to get rid of that adenosine, and that is through deep, slow wave sleep. It kind of flushes your brain out. So throughout the night, you get these pulsatile movements of cerebral spinal fluid that sort of flushes, like these tubes and cells, and it's kind of like pushes out all of the byproducts and all the buildup. It's all of the gunk. It's kind of like gurning or street sweeping
on your brain.
Yeah, and so if you get to work in the morning and you haven't done that, you haven't cleaned your brain out, you will come into the office, you'll feel overwhelmed, you'll be looking for problems, you'll feel like you don't have the resources for the day, you'll be irritable, you will be reactive, you'll be suspicious, you'll be anxious. And that's no state to be making really good decisions, being creative, being open, collaborative, having psychological safety in your team. And I know I was working with one of the bosses from a big global manufacturing organization, and he says he wakes up in the morning and he looks at his Whoop device, and if he is in the red, meaning he hasn't had enough sleep, he won't have important conversations. He won't have meetings which critical decisions have to be made, because he knows he's in the wrong headspace. And that's why I love measuring sleep, is because we might think that we've had a great sleep and we wake up and we've actually missed out that significant part of our sleep architecture. And we think, we like to post-rationalize. We're like, I feel like crap. It's probably I hate my job. It's probably I hate my boss, my partner, my team. But actually, you've just got a brain full of adenosine and you feel like crap, and you're making it about everything else when you just need a really good, hearty sleep.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And it's just like the body is wild, and it is amazing that it kind of makes sense, right? We would have this almost self-protective mechanism to kind of slow the brain down, right? But at the end of the day, it's like you can't keep going. We need some device to kind of to protect you, right? So you don't kind of overheat or whatever a hard drive. It is interesting. You mentioned Whoop. Like, I'm aware of Whoop, and I think it probably maybe cause and effect. I'm not sure which, but getting the Whoop device is interesting. Like, I would go to bed at 10, wake up at 6 and go, I've had 8 hours sleep. You get the Whoop device and you kind of realize, hang on, that's actually not true. And some days it is true, but some, Whoop will measure how long it takes to get to sleep. It gives you the breakdowns, right, of light sleep and SWS that you mentioned.
Yes, work sleep, yeah.
And it kind of categorizes certain parts into deep sleep, and it gamifies it. And I think that which doesn't get measured doesn't get done, right? And actually starting to, so now it is a matter of, often you've got to be in bed for 8.5 hours to get, 7 hours and 45. Or I think that's so fascinating, the idea of not making, and for those that wear Whoop, they'll kind of know what a red kind of reading is and what a amber and green, but the idea of not making big decisions, just even the idea of putting yourself into the mentality of, okay, I'm not actually going to perform very well today. That's okay, but at least I'm aware of it. As opposed to just being foggy and grumpy all day,
There is, like, for elite athletes and for people who have no choice, have to perform, I do train on the importance of not conflating sleep deprivation with sleep deprivation anxiety and giving themselves a double whammy. So I know that negative mental rumination is extremely metabolically expensive. So if you wake up, so there's a lot of athletes that don't like looking at their metrics because they get so frothed up about it and they get worried about it. Where, okay, you have to understand that if you have one night of bad sleep, that if you're a fit and relatively healthy adult, you're going to be totally fine. You not having sleep, then overlaying sleep deprivation, anxiety on top of that is conflating it will actually create more negative outcomes than if you just go, you know what, I feel actually pretty good, and you look for evidence that you feel very good. And so you have to be very careful. Sleep deprivation, second night, third night, then you're running into significant trouble, and you will not be making decisions. You'll be reactive. Your risk-taking profile will change dramatically. There is decrements, but one night you've got to understand you're going to be fine, and you don't get anxious or neurotic about it. But yeah, just on the Whoop thing, I really think if you don't measure it, you can't move it. And yeah, if you are okay with looking at your data and you do have that sort of mental discipline, and then you feel like you've got agency over your life, I think it's a really good idea to measure it. And you don't have to wear Whoop all the time. I think that once you realize that, what are the things that really ruin your sleep? What are the foods? What are the activities or the modalities? Alcohol. You can get this sort of boundary limitations framework. You go, okay, I'm okay if I have 2 glasses of wine fairly early in the night and I don't eat meat at night, I have my protein at time, or if I do this massage or I meditate, and you can kind of work out your formula, like in a very scientific manner, and do little mini experiments on yourself. Once you work that out, you don't need to have it on all the time, I think.
And you really do, like as a sample of one, I think it probably has been the biggest thing that has had me cut back booze, right? Not all booze, but just that you sleep so badly. And it's not even drinking a lot. You might drink like 3 or 4 glasses of wine or whatever on a night, and it just screws your sleep. And 1 or 2, and it's maybe you're okay. And obviously none's better than some, but it's I think just having the numbers, it's not just this kind of subjective feeling anymore. It's like, no, actually, if I'm drinking on a weeknight, it will mean I wake up feeling pretty bad. Well, the numbers will say that I'm pretty bad. It's kind of,
and often like you can see you have your heart rate variability changes for up to 3 days. Yeah, I mean, I'm very sad about it because I do love red wine. So I've been trialing out, Merkel, which is that prebiotic from that sort of metabolizes the alcohol before you get absorbed. That actually does work. There's another one I think has come out in Australia. I can't remember the name of it, but they've really been pumping it on social media. So I think, I mean, we live in a culture where alcohol is very prevalent. It's part of our culture. So, I think you need to work around it, but really understand alcohol is incredibly detrimental to your performance and sleep.
100%. What advice would you give on, I think like most of us, like, don't sit there on your big glaring screen before you're trying to get to sleep. Like what other, I think measuring it is awesome, trying to cut back on booze where possible. Other bits of advice around how to get better sleep going?
Yeah, so I mean, you've got to give yourself a framework as to why you want to do it. Like you have to have, experiment and gone, wow, I got into bed at 9:30, and like sort of take note of how well you performed the next day. So you give yourself like that psychological reward. Yeah, I know this is important to me. So you just have to, if you're not disciplined yourself, you've got to look at what is keeping you up at night. And often it's like your phone or Netflix or, just, sitting on a couch and just going, off into another dimension watching, a movie. And so when I was doing my PhD, it was so stressful that was the only time I really sort of got into watching Netflix. And I'd be like, it'd be 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd be like, oh, it's like a junkie. One more episode before you knew it. I'm like, oh my God, I've had to get up and lecture at 8 in the morning. And so I created this way to create discipline in my life when I didn't have it. And so I got one of those plugs from IKEA that has the timer in it. And so I plugged in my modem into that timer and I set the timer to go off automatically at 9:30. So, these streamers, they know exactly how to hit your dopamine system. So the last part of what you see in a show will be a cliffhanger and it'll just roll straight onto the next episode. So you kind of like, unless you're super disciplined, before you know it, you're into the next episode. So I knew that. So I'd be sitting on the couch and all of a sudden the power would go off my modem. And so my show would stop and I'd be like, oh, damn it. But what I did was I put the modem right up in a cupboard, right far away, behind all these cords. And in order for me to get up to that cupboard, I used to have to drag a little step ladder, and actually kept the step ladder in another room. So for me to get up and turn the Netflix back on, there was these multiple steps. And by the time I got dragged, this thing sort of stood up and tried to turn the motor back on, my adult brain would kick in and say, stop it, go to sleep. Okay, So I would really recommend putting these steps in if you can't be disciplined, and just until you train yourself and, keep things out of mind, out of sight. My phone turns to a dark black and white gray at a certain time so that it doesn't look so interesting. Keep my phone somewhere else. I dropped the lights in my house of an evening, so I've got only warm lights, nothing overhead, because if you get overhead light hitting the bottom of your retinal cells, after 10 o'clock, it does send a message to your habenula, then to your pancreas. And the next day you'll be more hungry for salty, sugary, fatty foods, and you'll be slightly pro-aggressive, because basically your primitive brain's thinking, okay, what are you doing out of the cave, late at night? There's only two reasons that humans really would stay up at night, out of the cave, and that'd be hunt or be hunted. And those require stress hormones. So if you're getting light from above, your brain will start to produce stress hormones, which completely ruin your sleep. So trying to minimize all of the excitatory information coming into your eyeballs, light, sounds, noise, in the lead up to bed. We know that if you are a little insomniatic, a 40-degree centigrade hot bath 1 to 2 hours before bed counterintuitively will help you drop your core body temperature by 2 degrees. So in order for you to get into deep, slow wave sleep, your core body temperature needs to get down by 2 degrees. And so if you counterintuitively heat up your body, you'll drop quicker. So it's sort of vasodilating, and it does make you sleepy. So yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, meta-analysis. So there's all those things that you should avoid. Sugar before bed. Whoop data says that if you eat sugary foods in the before bed, you're going to sleep on average 26 minutes less, because it's kind of like putting fuel in the furnace. You are like increasing your metabolic churn, your resting heart rate goes up, and your gut biome gets activated. So don't eat sugar before bed. Don't have that ice cream. Don't have those chocolate or whatever. Have nuts which has tryptophan in it, which is a precursor to melatonin, which is the sleep hormone. So, I mean, there's heaps of things you can do. Don't play games. Don't play any fighting games, computer games. Yeah, watch what you're putting into your eyeballs. Is it excitatory? Does it make you angry? Does it make you, sad? Yeah, be careful. Read a book.
It's awesome stuff. I mean, if you hadn't already said it, I was going to say you need to write a book on this topic. Yeah. It's great. After sleep, like what's the next big lever, like around stress? What are the things, like what do you see?
So once you've got your sleep sorted, you can really control like mental rumination in the directions of your thoughts. It's not like your thoughts are thinking you, but I don't know which comes first, depending on you, but I think diet and exercise are almost, head to head. And I think that I see, wellness and flourishing as a formulaic approach. So there will be sleep as the primary lever, then there'll be exercise and diet, then there'll be, relationships and your environment, like your significant other and the environment that you live in, and then there's work and finances. And at any one time, none of those levers are going to be on green, right? You're going to have to manage them according to the context of what is happening in your life. And so you can't get really strung out about not always eating really well, or not always exercising enough, or not seeing your friends or enough. Because these are, as we're adults, it's really hard to have all of them on green. There are people who do it, but they're often like super neurotic and annoying. And those people just like, and the stress that they generate, I've got to be in bed now. I can't eat that. No, I can't talk to you. Or, I need to run 10 Ks before lunch. Like the stress that causes, I think can counter interact with all the good that you're doing. So you've really got to, anytime you feel cortisol, anytime you feel adrenaline because you're not reaching your diet, exercise, or sleep goals, just know that cortisol is probably much worse. And so
can you unpack that again? So if cortisol being, that's
the stress hormone, the primary stress hormone. So I think always try to have sleep consistency. So being better around the same time. If you're going to do anything, go for that one. If you then diet and exercise become, head to head. I really think you should move your body. You really need to be, getting inside your muscles, your long skeletal muscles. Anytime you pull or like have movement in those skeletal muscles, you produce proteins called myokines. Now, these are anti-anxiety, antidepressive proteins that make you feel amazing. It's Mother Nature's reward for running, moving. And so I really strong, even if you're at work, get like a hand grip, do dips while you're standing there, lift your ankles, like do calf raises. So I think movement of your body, it also helps your lymphatic system, push fluids through, just any type of movement. And then diet, for me, I don't have anything packaged. I don't eat sugar and I don't eat wheat. The naughty thing I do is red wine. But apart from that, I eat really well. I don't have anything with MSG, food colorings, flavorings. I really like, if it's more than 2 degrees from its natural form, I typically don't eat it.
And what advice do you give to people? Because I suspect this has been a lifelong pursuit for you, or decades of like one percenters, right, to get to this point. Like, and I suspect that listeners there'll be a spectrum, right? There'll be some who are as disciplined as you, have got it all going. There's going to be some who are probably halfway on that journey. But what about like if you're at the other end of the spectrum and it's Macca's, it's fast food, it's not looking after yourself, it's booze and drugs, and like what are the ways to try to move yourself in the right direction, but also doing it in a way that you're setting yourself up to succeed and not just
well, I'm not that disciplined, right? I mean, like I had a massive weekend. I know like how to get back. So I always say, like, do the good things most of the days, so then you can do bad things, right? So I'm all about, like, I love having fun. I love going out. I love having, a blowout on the weekend, but I know exactly what I need to do to get back on track. And I don't feel guilty about it. Like rumination and guilt is really bad. But like, if you are like really down the other end of the spectrum and you're not doing anything right, first, I mean, just get your sleep right for a start. Just do that one thing. And if you can't get your sleep right, get sleep consistency. So that means try to get to bed at the same time every night. And so what you find is a lot of other stuff just falls into place because you've got the bandwidth to think about eating better or exercising. So if you can't get to bed early, at least go to bed at the same time every night, even if it's late. Right? So just have one consistent thing in your life. And then I think that when people are trying to anesthetize themselves with alcohol, drugs, food, what they're trying to do is like they're trying to as I said, anesthetize from a feeling, right? There's some emotion that they don't want to feel. And so before you go to the fridge, like, and you mindlessly like standing there, and before you know it, you've just rammed something into your face. Just try and think, what was I thinking right before that moment? Or before you go to get a cigarette, or before you go to like reach for a drink, or you plan a big night, you're going to go out and get on it. You think, like, what was I just thinking? And you will find that there will be a persistent emotion that you're avoiding. And I think then once you just go, oh, you know what sends me to the fridge? You know what sends me to the bottle is that thing. And then you need to go and get some professional help. I mean, there's so many books, there's so many podcasts. Even get on ChatGPT and say, I have a food addiction, or I have this addiction. And I just realized the thought that made me want to do that thing is this thought. What do you think I should do? And ChatGPT, even the free version, is excellent at being your personal psych.
Will it generally be a consistent emotion that's driving that impulse or that desire, or will it jump around?
It could jump around, but like at the basis of it, it's probably the same thing. It's fear of not being loved, fear of not being accepted, humiliation, embarrassment. So it's some emotion that makes you feel separate from others, or separate from your real self.
And a negative emotion, obviously, right?
And it could be dressed up as I'm overweight, I am unlovable, I can't get a promotion, I'm not earning much money. But when you peel the onion back and you ask why do you feel like that, there usually is a kernel, and it's probably something that might have started in your childhood, something from your parents. But yeah, I think that a life left unexplored is a life not worth living. And as you get older, you think, my God, I'm so sick of being sick of myself. Like, surely I've got to work my shit out by now. And I think that unless you endeavor into uncovering what's driving these bad behaviors, why do I keep doing the same dumb stuff over again? And you really are sick of that person that does that. It's really hard.
Mm.
to ever be successful and ever be like truly happy and have really good relationships and be a good parent. Like I've spent a lot of time like investigating, like, why was I like that? Why did I do those things?
It's fascinating. So kind of getting to the crux of that kernel as you described it,
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
theory, and resolve that, and then these other things, these impulses dissipate. And
Yeah, because it's never about the drugs. It's never about the food. It's never about the gambling. It's never about those impulses. That's just the behavior that comes out of avoidance of a deeper emotion. So where people will go, oh, you're an alcoholic, you need to go and, you know, go to a facility where you don't drink. Okay, you might stop drinking, but you'll probably take up taking something other unhelpful, dopamine eliciting behavior. Like it's never about the thing you're doing. It's always about the deeper emotion.
it's fascinating. The thing is not the thing.
No, it's not the drugs. It's not the alcohol. It's not the booze. It's not the food. And I think people get caught up in that.
It's fascinating. Oh, the kind of stress, burnout, sleep, it's fascinating stuff, right? And I think it, like marketers or no marketers, I think all of us can take something into our life with that. I'd like to just move into decision making and decision making under pressure, and I think probably a lot of it is intrinsically linked to what we've just spoken about: sleep and being ready to go and having a clear mind. But maybe if you could just talk a little bit about like what you work with your clients on in terms of good decision making and how that kind of comes to be.
I know that when people are under pressure and stress, they often revert back into primitive processes, or they'll see themselves behaving in ways that like their parents would speak to them, and so I didn't want to be like that. Like I'm different, and I know that, you know, people listening may have sat through, you know, thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars of professional personal development, but in those moments when you need to show up, when the pressure is on, when in those critical times, and you need to make a decision, all of those high order concepts that you have been taught, those 5-point strategies, all that blah, 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 it just goes, you forget about it. Like, what was that thing? And you actually end up reverting to quite primitive processes. So that's why I always go, lead yourself, understand your physiology, and you need to engage in stress inoculation. You need to practice making decisions under pressure on less critical constructs before you do the big things, because you want to know how you act under pressure. And that's why I engage a lot in stress inoculation training, like putting people in intense, I would sleep deprive people, I would shock them, I would physically like make them uncomfortable, just so when they knew, okay, I act like this under pressure.
I like it how you're laughing as you say that. That's for listeners. It's Gemma's laughing at.
Did involve some electric shocks and tasers and, you know, awful things, but it's really good. But also know that there are many factors which will feed into how you make decisions under pressure. It's like there's genetics, epigenetics, your proclivity for risk, you know, what you were exposed to in your uterine environment, in your mother's stomach. If she was stressed out, you have a different stress tolerance. You might be a little more reactive. You might be a little more notice negativity, or you might be like sort of geared towards bad things happening. Even your own, how much you've slept really does change your decision making, even your blood glucose levels. So we know that if you have a blood glucose that goes up and then it goes down. So if you're eating lots of sugar and then you have to make a decision and your blood glucose level has a dip,
yeah,
because your insulin's going to pull it out of your bloodstream, because your body doesn't like high levels of glucose in the system. And that dip of sugar actually will make you have a different decision-making outcome than if you had a stable blood glucose. But in fact, there's this really interesting study where they got people they gave them voodoo dolls, 300 couples, and they gave them voodoo dolls and pins. And then they put those continuous glucose monitors on their arm. And they said, every time your partner pisses you off, put a pin into that voodoo doll. And so you could imagine at the end of 6 weeks, they sent these voodoo dolls back in and there were, you know, pins everywhere. And then they looked at their blood glucose levels, and then it correlated. The more dips they had, the more pins they had. So what you eat actually determines how pissed off you are, or like how good you are at making rational decisions. So that's a big thing. But also, you need to really get educated, like, and always before you make a decision, look at the other side. Don't always assume that you have, enough information that you are right. Always test your assumptions. Always say, like, have a dissenting, little angel on your shoulder and a devil on your shoulder, and go, if I was to argue against myself, what would I do? And use ChatGPT or whatever platform you use, but argue against yourself. That's what I always say about decision making.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I think the ChatGPT bit is really, like, I think it was really interesting, given all of your background and all of your experience, still leaning into ChatGPT, for that kind of that kernel of actual, I guess, psychological help. But then as that kind of chatbot sanity check, and it's firmly in our space, right? ChatGPT, technology, marketing, like, we have always gone to Google to find the answers to problems that we have and to look for service providers and for self-help. And ChatGPT is incredible. And yeah, I personally use.
I've got like 6 on I got 6 that I pay for. I've got all of them, and I'm constantly testing them every day to see which one's better for which functionality. And like it changes every day. And so I think you've just got to be on top. In fact, I did a keynote, like, what do we need in a world that's going to be AI driven? And I've been studying this for over a year now, and I think emotional intelligence is the one skill that we should be trying to hire for, foster, maintain, and grow in our workforce, in ourselves, because when the marginal cost of IQ is coming to zero, like, you can get someone who's beyond PhD level, over 400, equivalent IQ at your fingertips for almost nothing. Like, where are we left? Like, what's left to do and be is nothing but human. And what are those human factors? It's emotional intelligence, the ability to understand, perceive, use emotional information and data to create teams and create psychological safety, understand the human condition. I mean, AI is getting very, very good at it, but if I was going to do anything, I would teach my kids emotional intelligence.
And how do you do it? Like, if you're working with a client and it's a complex team and you've got politics and all those things going on, like, what are the pillars that you try to lean on in terms of, like, emotional intelligence? And I think some people, it's more innate to some than others, right? Like, how do you try to foster that and encourage it to grow?
Well, just understand it's a thing, and that the most successful people, though obviously they have high IQs, but they also have the combination of high IQ and high emotional intelligence. So for those that don't know what it is, so I did my PhD in it, but that was one of the factors. Emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive emotions in others. So that's micro expressions, understanding someone's lying, understanding their body language, their vocal intonation, just like being able to look and see someone and go, oh, okay, there's something going on in there. And then also emotional perception of yourself. So understanding, like, when you can start to feel your heart racing, when you feel like your emotional landscape is starting to shift within yourself, and knowing that that's happening. The second is then understanding why, like, why would I have this emotion? Understanding that emotions transmute, blend, and they then turn into something else. So you can have 2 seemingly opposing emotions exist in the same person at the same time. So you can have, you can be sad or happy at the same time. So that would be, I am reminiscing about my wonderful time I went to the beach with my grandmother, but she's dead. And that comes, happy and sad becomes melancholy. And understand that there's a complexity in emotions, and that you can almost read the future. If you know that person's got that emotion, then that happened, well, they're probably going to end up there. So it's almost like crystal ball reading, incredibly important. Then there's using emotional data to make decisions. So when you've got AI, it can give you, like, oh, this is probably what's going to happen. But then if you add in the emotional data to a situation, you go, well, it's probably going to end up like this, because you understand, and then you're using those to make decisions. And then the most important part of emotional intelligence. And I think if you're going to be successful, if you want your children to be successful, if you want your team to be successful, this is the most important skill that you have to foster, and that is emotional regulation. Emotional regulation of yourself, knowing how to down-regulate yourself or up-regulate yourself in those critical moments, but also being able to regulate your team. Your team's flat, they're tired, but you've got to get this stuff done. How do you bring them up? Or your team's bouncing around and everyone's being silly and you've got some high attention to detail tasks to do. How do you bring them down? Like, this is the most critical skill out of anything. Running teams, leadership, parenting, being healthy, being disciplined, is regulating your own emotions, because that's the thing that drives people. Emotions drive people, data doesn't.
Do you have, because I think we could probably do a podcast, we could do 10 podcasts on the topic of emotional regulation.
Yeah.
Do you have any, I mean, maybe ChatGPT is a good place to start, but do you have any kind of resources, books, podcasts, any advice for listeners that kind of go, hang on, that sounds like something that I need to spend some time on?
I should know, but I mean, I've just read so many books and papers, I can't even pinpoint one. So,
and I think also not deep scientific, you know what I mean? I think probably what the level we're at versus the level you're at could be two quite different things, you know?
If you look at Diary of a CEO, Mark Brackett, he's from Yale. So he's really famous around emotional intelligence. He does a lot of stuff with schools.
Yep.
So yeah, Diary of a CEO, Mark Brackett, Dr. Mark Brackett. So Daniel Goleman was kind of like the guy who brought EI out into the public, his book. If you Google emotional intelligence and then actually, like, there's people talking at Google and why they love emotional intelligence so much. I think what you've got to do is look at your context. So I'm in marketing. Why would emotional intelligence be good for me? Get onto Perplexity. That's also an AI platform that's really good for search. Go, what should I be reading? It'll come up with amazing resources. But yeah, I can't think of one. But
that's great. No, I think that's honestly, that's those two authors, those two books, the Google, YouTube stuff. I think it's because it is hard. We've only got an hour together, and I kind of there's a limit to how deep that we can go. But I do think that kind of self-awareness, right? Like, I am feeling like this, therefore it will have this impact on these people. And I think how you carry yourself through a day, whether positively or negatively, impacts everyone around you, right?
Well, there's the chemo signaling phenomenon. So when you are having an emotion, you'll be out letting off like tiny droplets of pheromones or stress hormones or certain combinations of molecules that actually will change the emotional status of those around you. So for instance, when you are stressed out and you produce cortisol, it is super infectious and it will change the neural processing in your team. You get activation in the amygdala or the fear center. So you have to be very, very cognizant of the emotional state that you're in. And if you want to walk into a room and have effect, people will catch your emotions through emotional contagion, through chemo signaling. It's very potent.
It's really, really interesting. Could you hear my FaceTime just going? Did it not come through? My son's quite FaceTiming me. That's hilarious. Cool. Okay, there's only 3 minutes. I think maybe move to wrap up is probably. And Gemma, we finish every episode of the pod with the one question. What's that one piece of advice that you'd give to an in-house marketer? So I'd love to hear what you're thinking.
So if you want to get people to listen to you and actually have behavioral change, you have to move them through emotion. Data doesn't move people, emotions move people. And so I've got a list of 5 constructs that if you are going to give an audience a message, try and make sure they fit into one of these 5 categories, because these 5 categories have been shown to move emotion the most. So either it's the 5 S's: survival. So what you're selling, telling, or sharing either has to hit something that has to do with their survival, safety, medical, fear. People that give their attention to subjects which impede or help their chances of survival. So that taps into that primitive brain. Then there is the element of surprise, so pattern interrupt. So if there's something that is unexpected, will catch people's attention. So something out of the ordinary that doesn't fit into their mental models of the world or what you're typically saying. And there's sustenance. So something that's going to feed them, give them sustenance, and money goes into that. So does that thing that you're talking about actually increase their ability to grow, and including money?
Yep.
There's the age or one sex. There's if you think about, there's the cocktail party phenomenon. There's only two things that will break through a noisy cocktail party noise. If you're standing there talking and if you hear one, your name called, it'll break through the noise and you'll go, oh, someone called my name. Or if someone mentions sex, it'll break through the cocktail party noise phenomenon.
Is that true? Is that actually true? Those two things are the things?
Yeah, your name and sex.
Interesting.
So anything that helps you get more, look sexier, any advice around that? Which you've got to be, careful these days. And then status, anything that you are talking about will improve someone's status or reduce the threat to their status. So survival, surprise, sustenance, sex, and status. They're my 5 tips. So make sure that your message goes within those one or a couple of them. That's
brilliant. I think that's practical takeaways for the Rocket team. I'm going to feed that straight back to our to the marketing team to be working on campaign.
Then you go, is my message have anything to do with those things? You're like, yeah, it does. It hits a couple of them, even better.
All 5. That's a challenge for the team to come up with something that hits all 5 of them.
Yeah, that'd be a weird marketing campaign.
It's going to be in a cocktail party, I think. But thanks so much for coming onto the pod. That was awesome. It was I enjoyed the session at South by Southwest so much, and I feel kind of gone even past that in this one, so it's awesome. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, hope everyone enjoyed the pod.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.